Rain slapped the pavement hard enough to sting skin. Amara didn't notice. She was already on her knees by the side of the road, fingers digging into wet concrete, chest heaving like her lungs had forgotten how to work. Her suitcase lay on its side a few feet away, cracked open, clothes bleeding out into the rain. A heel snapped clean in half lay beside it like evidence of a crime. She tried to stand. Her legs folded instantly. A sob tore out of her before she could stop it. Raw, loud, ugly. The kind of cry people made when something inside them finally broke beyond repair. Cars rushed past her, tires hissing, headlights flashing briefly over her soaked hair and trembling shoulders before disappearing again. Seoul at night never stopped. It didn't care who fell. "Get up," she whispered to herself, her accent thick now, the way it always became when she was tired or hurt. Just get up. Her phone buzzed weakly in her hand. 1% battery. She looked at the screen, half hoping, half dreading what she'd see. No new messages. She laughed then, a broken, hysterical sound that turned into another sob. Her fingers slipped, and the phone slid from her hand into a shallow puddle, the screen flickering once before going black. That did it. Amara pressed her face into her palms and cried like she hadn't cried since she was a child back home, when crying still meant someone might come running. No one came. A black sedan slowed. She didn't hear it at first. Only when the rain softened suddenly did she realize something large was blocking it. She looked up through blurred vision and saw the car idling beside her, sleek and impossibly clean, the kind of car she'd only ever seen from far away. The passenger window rolled down. "Mississippi?" The voice was calm. "Male, Korean, polished, like it belonged in boardrooms and glass buildings." She didn't answer. "Miss," the man said again, more firmly this time. "You can't stay here." Amara wiped her face roughly and tried to stand again, pride flaring hot and angry in her chest. "I'm fine," she snapped, though her knees shook violently beneath her. "Just go." The door opened anyway. Leather shoes stepped onto the wet road. Dark trousers. A long coat. He came into view slowly, as if he had nowhere else to be, as if time bent around him instead of the other way around. Kang Joon-seo took in the scene in seconds. The broken suitcase, the snapped heel, the foreign girl soaked to the bone, shaking with cold and something much worse. "You're not fine," he said. She laughed again, bitter. "Congratulations. You have eyes." Most men would have bristled. He didn't. Instead, he shrugged out his coat and held it out to her. "Take this." She stared at it like it was an insult. "No, you're drenched." "I said no." Her voice cracked on the word, betraying her. She hated herself for it instantly. He studied her face more closely now. The bruised exhaustion under her eyes. The way her jaw trembled when she clenched it. The way she looked at him, not afraid, not impressed, just done. "Fine," he said evenly, folding the coat over his arm. "Then at least move off the road." She swayed. Before she could fall again, his hand shot out, steady and warm, gripping her elbow. She froze. "Don't touch me," she whispered, fear flashing sharp and sudden. His hand loosened instantly. "I won't, but you're going to fall." "And why do you care?" she demanded, finally looking him fully in the face. He hesitated. That alone was strange. "Because," he said after a moment, "it's raining and you're crying and you're human." Something in her chest twisted violently at that. She looked away first. "Leave," she said, quieter now. "Please." The rain fell between them, heavy and relentless. Then he nodded. "All right." Relief flooded her so fast it made her dizzy. He turned back toward the car and stopped. "You're African," he said, not as a question. She stiffened. So you're far from home," he replied calmly. "And whatever happened tonight didn't start tonight." Her throat closed. "That's none of your business," she said. "You're right." He opened the car door again. "But I'm still not leaving you here." She snapped her head up. "You just said—" "I said I wouldn't force you," he corrected. "Not that I pretend you don't exist." Something about that unsettled her more than anger would have. He gestured toward the back seat. "Get in. I'll take you somewhere safe." No conditions. She stared at the open door like it was a trap. Why? She demanded. His lips pressed together briefly. Because if I drive away and you're still here when I look back, I won't sleep. She searched his face for mockery, for menace, for the oily charm she'd learned to recognize too late in men like her landlord, like her former boss. She found none, only tired eyes. And something else, something guarded. 30 minutes, she said finally. That's all. He inclined his head. 30. Inside the car, the warmth hit her so hard her vision swam. She hugged herself tightly, teeth chattering despite her best efforts. The car pulled away smoothly, Seoul's light streaking past windows. Silence stretched. Amara, she said suddenly, surprising herself. My name. He glanced at her in the mirror. Kang Joon-seo. She frowned. The name rang somewhere deep in her memory, tied to headlines and whispered conversations in cafes. Oh, she said flatly, so you're rich. He smiled faintly. That's one word for it. She snorted. Figures. He didn't rise to it. They drove in silence for several minutes before he spoke again. Do you want to tell me what happened? No. All right. Another pause. My boss fired me, she said abruptly, after 6 months of unpaid trial. That's illegal. She laughed without humor. Try proving it. He said nothing. And my landlord changed the locks, she continued, voice shaking now. Said foreigners bring trouble. Told me to collect my things and leave before morning. That's also illegal. Well, she snapped, tears threatening again. Welcome to being black and broke in a foreign country. He absorbed that quietly. The car slowed as they turned into a private driveway flanked by trees. Where are we going? She asked, alarm spiking. Somewhere warm, he replied, and quiet. The gate slid open soundlessly. Her stomach tightened. I didn't agree to this, she said, panic creeping in. You agreed to 30 minutes, he reminded her gently. We're still within them. The building they stopped in front of wasn't a hotel. It was smaller, modern, discreet. No signs, no bright lights. A clinic. Her breath caught. No, she said immediately, backing away from the door as he opened it. I'm not sick. I don't need. This isn't for you, he said. She stared at him. Then why are we here? He hesitated again. That hesitation told her everything. You, she said slowly, dread curling in her stomach, are the one who's sick. He met her gaze fully now. Yes. The word landed heavy between them. Why bring me here? She whispered. Because, he said quietly, I needed to stop pretending for one night. The clinic door slid open, spilling white light into the rain. Amara stayed where she was, heart pounding. 30 minutes. She looked at her broken suitcase, her dead phone, the road she'd been crying on. Then she looked back at the man who owned more than she could imagine, and yet looked like he was standing at the edge of something far more terrifying. She stepped inside. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and quiet money. Amara felt at the moment she stepped inside. That cold, controlled calm that didn't belong to places where people actually healed, but to places where secrets were kept alive just long enough to be managed. The door slid shut behind them with a soft hiss. She flinched. You can still leave, Kang Joon-seo said, noticing it immediately. She swallowed. I know. But she didn't move. A nurse bowed slightly, eyes flicking from him to Amara, and back again, confusion carefully masked. Sir, we weren't expecting. I know, he cut in smoothly. Just do what you need to do. The nurse nodded and disappeared down a hallway. Amara turned to him. You bring people here often? No. Then why me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he shrugged out his wet jacket and hung it neatly on the back of a chair, movements precise, almost ritualistic. Sit, he said, gesturing to a bench along the wall. She sat, clutching her damp sweater around herself. Her body was still trembling, but not from cold anymore. Are you dying? She asked bluntly. His jaw tightened. That's an unkind way to ask. She lifted her chin. You didn't bring me here to lie to me. A corner of his mouth twitched despite himself. No. So. Yes, he said quietly. But not tonight. Her chest loosened just a fraction. What kind of sick? She pressed. Because sick can mean many things when you're rich. He let out a slow breath. Neurological. Progressive. Complicated. Her eyes sharpened. Pain. Sometimes. Memory? Sometimes. That landed harder than she expected. She looked away first. They sat in silence, broken only by the distant hum of machines. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened and closed. Footsteps. Murmured Korean she couldn't quite catch. You didn't have to stop, she said suddenly. I know. You could have driven past. Like everyone else. I know. She turned back to him. So why didn't you? He leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. Because once, a very long time ago, my mother cried by the side of the road. Amara's breath caught. No one stopped for her, he continued, voice flat but eyes dark. She didn't die that night, but she never forgave the world for it. Something heavy settled between them. A doctor appeared then, older, silver-haired, eyes kind but tired. He spoke quickly to Joon-seo in Korean, words clipped and clinical. Amara watched his face change. Subtle shifts she wouldn't have noticed if she wasn't already keyed in. The tightening around his eyes. The way his fingers curled into his palm. The doctor glanced at her. Is she? A friend. Joon-seo said. The word surprised both of them. The doctor nodded and lowered his voice. The scans show progression. Faster than last time. Joon-seo closed his eyes briefly. How long? He asked. The doctor hesitated. Amara stood abruptly. I'll wait outside, she said, suddenly feeling like she was intruding on something sacred. No, Joon-seo said immediately. Too quickly. Stay. The doctor raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Answer him. Amara said softly, meeting the doctor's gaze. He deserves to hear it plainly. The doctor studied her for a moment, then sighed. Months, he said. Maybe a year, if we're fortunate. The room went very still. Amara felt like the air had been punched out of her lungs. And it wasn't even her diagnosis. Joon-seo nodded once. Thank you. The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder briefly, then left him alone. Amara sat back down slowly. You're Kang Joon-seo, she said, the realization finally clicking fully into place. The Kang Group. Logistics. AI. Shipping. Half the ports in Asia. Yes. And you're telling me, she whispered, that all of that means nothing against this. Exactly. She laughed weakly. That's cruel. He looked at her. That's honest. Another silence stretched. You're not afraid, she said after a moment. He smiled, sad and sharp. I'm terrified. That startled her more than bravado would have. I just don't show it, he added. Fear is expensive. She barked out a laugh despite herself. Where I come from, fear is free. It just shows up uninvited. He studied her, something shifting behind his eyes. Where do you come from? Ghana, she said. Accra. Why Korea? She shrugged. Dreams are cheap until you try to live them. He nodded like he understood that intimately. They left the clinic soon after. The rain had softened to a drizzle. The city quieter now, like it was holding its breath. Where will you go? He asked as they reached the car. She hesitated. Nowhere. He didn't pretend not to hear that. You can stay at my place tonight, he said. Just tonight. Her eyes flashed. I don't sleep with men who stop for me on the road. Something like amusement flickered across his face. Good. I don't invite strangers for that reason. She studied him carefully. Rules? Yes. No touching. Agreed. No favors. Of course. And in the morning I leave. He paused. If you want to. She didn't miss that. His penthouse was nothing like she expected. No gold. No excessive shine. Just clean lines, dark wood, and silence so deep it almost rang. The windows overlooked the Han River, lights glittering like spilled jewels. This place is empty, she said before she could stop herself. He shrugged. I'm rarely here. She kicked off her ruined shoes and stood awkwardly by the door. Where do I? There, he said, pointing down a hallway. Guest room. Bathroom stocked. Towels are fresh. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded and turned away. In the guest room, Amara peeled off her wet clothes and stood under the shower longer than necessary, letting the heat soak into her bones. When she finally crawled into bed, exhaustion dragged her under instantly. She dreamed of roads and rain and a man standing alone at the edge of a dark sea. In the morning, the smell of something unfamiliar pulled her from sleep. She followed it to the kitchen, where Joon-seo stood awkwardly over a pot. Is that? She sniffed. Jollof rice, he said defensively. She stared. You're joking. I Googled, he said. The internet was very confident. She burst out laughing, the sound surprising both of them. That's not how... She stopped short when she saw the look on his face. Not irritation. Relief, like the sound had cracked something open in a room that hadn't heard laughter in a very long time. Sit, he said quietly. They ate together. The rice a disaster. The silence lighter than before. You don't have to leave today, he said eventually. She looked up. Those weren't the rules. I know, he said. I'm revising. She considered him carefully. Why? Because, he said, meeting her gaze, you see me. She swallowed. And because, he continued, voice lower now, I don't want to be alone while I'm still here. The honesty of it hit her square in the chest. She didn't answer right away out of the story is pulling you in. Pause for a second and like the video. It tells the algorithm you want more stories like this. And drop a comment if you think Amara should stay or run. She exhaled slowly. 1 week, she said finally, just until I find something. He nodded. 1 week. Neither of them said what they were both thinking. That 1 week was never going to be just 1 week. The week did not behave the way either of them expected. It began quietly. Amara woke early every morning out of habit. Her body still trained by years of juggling classes, part-time jobs, and survival. She moved softly through the penthouse, afraid of disturbing the stillness, until she realized the stillness was not sleep. Joon-seo was always already awake. Sometimes she found him standing by the window, staring at the river like it might answer questions he hadn't learned how to ask out loud. Other times he sat at the dining table with documents spread neatly before him, hands steady, expression calm, like a man pretending time had agreed to wait. You don't rest, she said one morning, pouring herself tea. I rest enough, he replied. That's not an answer. He glanced at her. It's the one I have. She stopped pushing after that, but she watched him closely. The pauses when he reached for a glass. The way his fingers stiffened sometimes. Just for a second, the headaches he brushed off with a quiet, I'm fine. That convinced neither of them. They began talking more. Not about feelings at first. About food. About music. About the small humiliations she'd swallowed since arriving in Korea. About the expectations he'd carried since childhood. Sharp and suffocating. My mother believed weakness was contagious, he told her one night as they sat on opposite ends of the couch, the city glowing below them. She thought if people saw you falter, they would abandon you. Did they? Amara asked. He smiled faintly. Eventually, she thought of her own mother, loud and stubborn and endlessly present, even in absence. Then your mother was wrong, she said simply. He looked at her for a long moment, like no one had ever offered him that possibility before. The week moved faster after that. A call came from his office, Ray's voices bleeding through the speaker before he cut it off. They know, he said quietly. Know what? Something, he replied. Enough to smell blood. The news broke 2 days later. Speculation. Anonymous sources. Headlines that dance around the truth without naming it outright. Kang Group CEO faces health questions to Titan weakening. Amara read the articles on her phone, anger burning hot in her chest. They're circling you, she said, like vultures. Yes, he agreed calmly. They always do. They're going to blame me, she said suddenly. He looked at her sharply. What? She's foreign. She's living in his house. She must be distracting him, using him, weakening him, she listed bitterly. I've seen this before. They won't touch you, he said firmly. She laughed. You underestimate how creative fear can be. She was right. The comments came first. Then the photos. A blurry image of her stepping out of his car, hood pulled low, dignity intact, but narrative already written for her. Foreign woman linked to Siamistry girl at Kang's side. Do you want to leave? Joon-seo asked her that night, his voice careful. I can make it disappear. She shook her head. No, you don't owe me. I know, she interrupted. That's why I'm staying. That was the night the balance truly shifted. The board called an emergency meeting. Faces stiff and polite, concern sharpened into calculation. You should step back, one man suggested smoothly. For the company. For yourself, another added. Let us carry the burden. Joon-seo listened, expression unreadable. Then Amara stood. The room froze. I'm not on your agenda, she said clearly, her accent firm and unapologetic. But since you've been discussing a man's life like it's a spreadsheet, let me remind you of something. They stared at her, stunned. He built this company while carrying something that would have broken most of you, she continued. And instead of asking how to support him, you're waiting to replace him. Silence. Joon-seo turned slowly toward her, something raw and unguarded in his eyes. She met it without flinching. If you remove him, she finished, you confirm that fear runs this company, not strength. The meeting ended without a vote. Outside the room, Joon-seo exhaled shakily. You didn't have to do that. Yes, she said softly. I did. The backlash was immediate. Threats, pressure, subtle warnings delivered through lawyers and intermediaries. Go, he told her that night, his voice breaking for the first time since she'd known him. Please, before this destroys you too. She stepped closer instead. When I cried by that road, she said quietly, you didn't ask if it was safe to help me. You just stopped. She reached for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. I'm not leaving, she said, not because I'm brave, but because I know what it feels like to be abandoned when you're weakest. Tears filled his eyes then, uncontrolled, silent. He bowed his head, forehead resting lightly against hers. For the first time, he let himself be held. The press conference came days later. Cameras flashed. Questions flew sharp and unforgiving. Joon-seo stood at the podium, pale but steady. I am ill, he said simply. I have been for some time. Gasps rippled through the room. I will not hide it, he continued, and I will not apologize for being human. He paused, then looked directly at Amara, standing just off stage. This woman, he said, voice thick, did not weaken me. She reminded me that power without honesty is nothing. The room fell silent. The story shifted overnight. Not all of it kinder, but truer. Weeks passed. The penthouse filled slowly with signs of life. Music, warm food, laughter that didn't echo so painfully anymore. His health declined, gently but unmistakably. Some days were harder than others. Some mornings he needed help tying his shoes. Amara never treated him like he was fragile. You still owe me proper jollof, she teased one evening. I'll learn, he promised. I have time. They both knew that wasn't guaranteed. One quiet night, they returned to the same road where they had first met. The rain was light this time, almost polite. Amara stood at the edge of the pavement, hands in her pockets, breathing in the cool air. I thought that road was the end of my life, she said softly. And now, he asked. She smiled. Now I think it was the beginning. He reached for her hand, fingers trembling but warm. Thank you, he said, for seeing me. She squeezed back. Thank you for stopping. The city moved around them, unaware, uncaring. But for once, that didn't matter, because two people had chosen courage over fear and found something truer than power. If this story moved you, please like the video. It helps stories like this reach more people. Subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories you won't forget. And comment below, would you have stopped that night or driven past? Because sometimes one choice changes everything.